Macca's Guides.
Hey guys, Macca here with my top 5 most underappreciated games of 2017. This is an annual video. I made one 2 years ago where I said that Rainbow Six Siege was a criminally underrated game. I thought I did pretty good with that one. And we made a video last year where I talked about games like Oxenfree, Virginia, and Steep. And I wanted to continue the trend with 2017. However, this year I didn't feel a strong connection to a game that I thought was both incredibly good, but also got either really poor reception from the public or really bad reviews. So this year I feel as though maybe my list isn't as strong as last year's, but you guys can let me know in the comments down below what you thought the most underappreciated game of the year was. A game that you really loved and you either thought not enough people played or not enough people give the proper attention and respect that that game deserves. Now, obviously, this is a very subjective list. I put together 5 games that I think deserve some more attention than they get, or maybe some more praise than they get, but this is a very kind of relaxed video. I don't want you guys to take these words way too seriously. There are games that I think are incredible that maybe not a lot of people have played, like What Remains of Edith Finch, that I didn't include on the list because I think it has really great reviews, and I think that most people who have played it know it's good. So again, this is all kind of just my personal opinion, and don't take anything I take too seriously. I will be taking my Game of the Year video a little bit more seriously in the way I number things. Before I bore you with too long of an intro, let's just get into the meat of the video. Before we get started, I did want to quickly talk about 2 games that didn't make the cut, and those are Need for Speed Payback, which I think is a really great racing game and a good entry into the series, although it suffers from some late game progression issues. Also Ruiner, which I think is a great twin-stick shooter. I ended up cutting it out of this video at the last possible second because I've talked about it in my most recent indie games video, and I think generally people do know it exists and it is a pretty good game. I don't know if it's as underappreciated as some of these other titles. Starting off at number 5, I have Agents of Mayhem, which I thought was a pretty underappreciated game because I had a lot of fun playing it. I thought the gameplay was pretty good, and it didn't receive very good reception, and I think a lot of people ended up skipping out on it. I also think that with Volition losing the Saints Row name, a lot of people didn't even really realize that it was by the same people, and it felt very similar to some of the late Saints Row games. And although I wasn't necessarily a fan of the story, and I think a lot of the humor in the game did fall flat or felt outdated, I did think this game functioned as a pretty good superhero game. The game did fall victim to the open world syndrome where it just throws you into a sandbox where you kind of do the same repetitive tasks over and over without any real goal in mind. However, it did combat a little bit of that by having the different characters that you could play, and each character felt like a different and unique experience, which really allowed the gameplay to feel mixed up and allows you to kind of experience the game how you wanted with more variety as you played. Although Agents of Mayhem isn't a Game of the Year contender, I think it deserved something better than its actual fate. You can pick it up for pretty cheap and you will get your 25 to 30 hours worth of open world fun, in my opinion. In at the number 4 position in this video, we have Flint Hook, a game which I've spent a decent amount of time talking about on the channel. I've also streamed it a few times on Twitch, and for those of you who haven't already heard about, you can see the gameplay on screen, but essentially it's a roguelike action platformer with the main thing being that you have a grappling hook that you can use to traverse levels. You'll start a run by picking a bunch of cards that you want to use during your run, and then you'll pick a series of ships that you want to board in order to steal the treasure at the end. Eventually, you'll reach the final boss for that area, and hopefully you defeat them in order to rinse and repeat on the next boss while gaining levels and getting more and more cards. Additionally, you'll be getting gold during your run, which you can spend on certain things. You can also take gambles and get curses given to you, and you can even get multiple curses given to you and find kind of ghost ships in the universe. There is a decent amount of variety here. There's an infinite mode as well as speedrunning and things like that. I had a lot of fun with this game. I think the art really stands out. The gameplay is a lot of fun, and the music is incredible. I don't think enough people know about this game, which is why it's at number 4. In at the number 3 position, I have The Surge, which is a Dark Souls-like game that came out around the mid-year. Now, personally, I'm not the biggest fan of Dark Souls-type games, so it was surprising to me that I enjoyed my time with The Surge. I felt that this game was more accessible to me and the world was more relatable, but I also got the tension-filled gameplay that many people like this genre for. I felt as though the controls were very well done and the ability to lock on to specific body parts was a cool gameplay mechanic. I also thought the levels were laid out pretty well, and I was a fan of the art direction, and the graphics are a pleasure to look at on the Xbox One X as well. All in all, this is not a game that I would necessarily consider for like my top game of the year, but it is a game that I would recommend. I think it's a good game. I think it's fun. I think a lot of people will enjoy it, and I think it deserves to be on more people's radars. In the number 2 position, I have Super Lucky's Tale, another game that I didn't consider for my game of the year. It wouldn't even break my top 15 if I did. However, I think it is very underrated. I think a lot of reviewers got it wrong, and I would recommend it for the right person. A lot of critics slam this game for having bad camera controls as well as poor controls in general. And although I would somewhat agree that the camera movement options were definitely lackluster, I thought that they weren't really necessary to be able to enjoy the game. And in fact, I went my entire 8-hour journey without moving my camera a single time. I had a decent amount of fun in this game going through and making sure to get every clover in every level. However, if you were to go through the game with only progression in mind, you'd probably miss out on a lot of small, cool little secrets that are scattered throughout each level. Also, I think this game has a ton of great variety from level to level and from minigame to minigame. It always feels like the level you're in is slightly different from the last one, and not just in its actual world, but in its gameplay mechanics and gameplay design. When you consider the colorful graphics and the playful atmosphere of the game, it's actually a good game to use to break up the really serious AAA titles that you play throughout the year, and the game doesn't overstay its welcome, even though it can't compete against games like Crash Bandicoot. It's also very important to realize that this game was offered at half price when it originally came out, and with subsequent sales you can get it for really cheap. Last but not least, on my list I have Candleman, which is actually a game that I personally didn't really expect much from, but was pleasantly surprised. When you describe the game, it seems like a somewhat generic 3D puzzle platformer, and you play as a candle, lighting your way through each level until you progress from chapter to chapter. But upon further analysis, you realize that it's actually a really solid and in-depth puzzle action game where each chapter introduces a cool and unique game mechanic that takes you through a whole bunch of different experiences. Whether you're using your flame in order to light up the darkness, or using your flame in order to melt away some ice, or even using it in order to see into a reflective surface and basically see into another dimension, there's always a new experience being thrown at you in this game. And I think that's what I appreciate the most about this game, is the sense of progression and the difficulty curve. It just seems to be made almost perfectly. Now, on top of all of that, I also know that this game has pretty easy gamer score, and I know that this game is on a lot of people's backlog. However, I would like to say that I think it deserves a little bit of your time, and I would definitely recommend that you try it. Because it is on a lot of people's backlog, and because a lot of people only see it as a gamer score opportunity, I think that is a valid reason for me to think it's a little bit underappreciated, and the reason that it's number 1 on our list. Again, remember that this list isn't necessarily the end-all, be-all, most serious ranked list for me. Alright, thank you guys so much for watching. Please leave a comment down below if there is a game that you think people need to try this year that not a lot of people have tried, or a game that maybe got some bad reviews that might have been patched, or that you thought was much better than the reviews led people to believe. I'd like to know some of your opinions about these games, and I do actually read the comments and respond to them from time to time. Thank you so much for watching. A special thanks to the amazing people on Patreon for supporting the show, and hopefully I see you guys next time. Peace.